Welcome to segment 4 of Alternative Education in the Crosshairs. We're going to talk about the dangers of excluding parents in education. To my right, I have Lynn Taylor from North Carolina, and to my left, I have Kirsten Lombard from Wisconsin, and I'm Mary Black from Indiana. And Kirsten is going to lead us in this discussion.
Sure. Well, I think what we want to do here right away is talk about what local control is and what it isn't. Again, more word games, understood meanings and hidden meanings. So if we could look just for a moment at what the basic understood definition of most people is. When you hear the word local control, most people think local school districts setting policy. And that means school boards as the representatives of parents, working with parents, taxpayers, and setting the policies that are appropriate to that community. However, that is not at all what is meant by the people pushing the education policy of today. What they are really talking about, their hidden definition is that the state determines a narrow range of matters in which school districts may have an equally narrow range of pre-selected options. So when you think about school boards today, you probably have noted that in most places, there really aren't a lot of people attending school board meetings. You may even have trouble finding people to run for school board. Why is that, do you suppose? Well, perhaps it's because the school boards don't have a lot of pull anymore. Most of their authority has been removed. These decisions have been centralized. School boards have been reduced to making very, very rubber stamp type decisions, or like building maintenance decisions, things like that. There's not a lot of weight there anymore. So why would people run for school board? Why would you spend your time, doing something that doesn't really have a lot of pull behind it? And why would you, as a parent, attend a school board meeting when there doesn't seem to be anything going on there that hasn't already been taken care of by somebody else?
And indeed, in my 43 years in the classrooms in various schools, I have witnessed this disintegration of the local school board. When I began as a teacher in 1974, we would have school board members come to talk with us after school, listen to what was going on in the classroom. Quite frequently, they were parents of our students, and there was not any animosity. Right. They were explaining to us what they wanted, and that was our job. Right. And that was the school board's job, right, was to represent the parents and the students and the taxpayers. Right. And it began to disintegrate as the state took on more and more responsibility for education, to the point now where it's the DOE. And so you're very right. It is nothing more than a rubber stamp now.
That's right. And in addition to that, we have, as a result of all of this federal legislation that you in particular have been detailing for us, Lynn, a situation in which corporations are now micromanaging what the school board is doing. So it's a really kind of a frightening situation. We don't want to overhype it, but I mean, people really need to be aware that higher strings are being pulled here. And when you think about pieces of legislation like the Workforce Investment Act or its reauthorization, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, and how that integrates with things like the Every Student Succeeds Act, all of these sorts of things, the springing up of workforce development boards in nearly every community, regional workforce development boards, state workforce development boards. What you're seeing now is that, again, with this competency-based training, the skills-based training, the workforce development boards in a given community are working very closely with the Board of Education, and generally speaking now.
Exactly. And what we need to understand is that because we have corporations who now believe that they can run education like a business, you have several well-known people who run these types of corporations. Their main goal in a multi-planned step of actions is to do away with local school boards altogether. Right. And what we're seeing, and here's the danger, is in ESSA, you have an increase in public-private partnerships. We have public-private partnerships who are coming into local school boards all over the nation, and I can, I have research that has proven this out. They're stacking the deck, if you will, on local school boards. And where this impacts alternate education is that your local school board is in charge of all education in your district, be it from daycare, if they have any sort of federal education funding, all the way through adult. So, of course, this is going to impact all education types. What do I mean by micromanaging school boards or stacking the deck? Common Core machine group members like Advanced Ed, Council of Chief State School Officers, they are coming in, micromanaging, and if they're not micromanaging your local school boards, they are sending your school board members, which are the mom and pops you're talking about, running for election and gaining a seat on the school board, and taking them to training sessions where they are indoctrinated with this is how education should look, smell, feel, and be.
Absolutely, and let me give you a fairly local example. As a matter of fact, we're filming today in Wisconsin in the Appleton area, in what's called the Fox Valley region of Wisconsin. And several years ago now, probably 3, 4, 5 years ago, when there were some state hearings, a woman from the Appleton area testified at one of our education hearings about having been to a meeting that she was invited to that was held by 3 entities that had joined hands. It was CESA 6, which is a regional education agency that essentially reports to DPI or is deeply connected to our Department of Public Instruction. It was the local Chamber of Commerce, Regional Chamber of Commerce, and it was another organization that represents big labor. Yeah. And they were basically trying to sell local business owners, foundation operators, etc., how on this 16-track career tracking scheme for the Fox Valley, and setting this up in the schools. So, I mean, this is real. She literally handed the committee members for this education hearing all of the presentations by these 3 organizations, which dovetailed literally perfectly. They had similar slides, almost exactly the same slides in some of them. I mean, they are all on the same page. They are talking behind the scenes. They are getting the deals done, and then they are going out and doing the marketing and pushing most of this through in advance of actual legislation, so that by the time the legislation is done, it's almost too late.
Yeah, everything's been laid out.
That's right. So people really have to be aware and kind of engaged on what's going on in their communities.
I would even challenge folks to do what I have done, and that's start reading the legislation, reading the policies. For example, had I not, when I was doing this school board research, had I not looked at some of the different county policies by some of the local school boards, I never would have caught that one of our counties in my state has pledged that they will do whatever it takes to adhere to the federal government, even to the point of going by the state if the state has not provided in certain instances. Now, that may not sound like a whole lot, but if you take into consideration one county represents thousands of people, if they're pledging their support more to the government than to the state,
to the federal government.
Right, excuse me. Yes, if they're pledging that they will do anything in education that will adhere to the federal government even above and beyond what the state has set out, that's a dangerous precedent.
Sure is.
And I think many parents will be stunned to learn some of the competencies that are coming down the pipe, as they say. And Kirsten, I think you're going to define the term for us.
And we've talked a little bit about competency before, but let's again look at what the understood definition of competency is versus the hidden definition of competency. You and I might understand competency as, again, proficiency in an academic area, but hidden definition behind all of this kind of troubling education policy and used by the elites who are pushing it, skills-based emotional and psychological training to be useful in and frankly to industry.
Right.
So that's really what we're talking about. And it used to be that when you got out of school, you found a job, and that job trained you basically according to their needs. They spent their own money, their own time to educate you to give you a base in their company, their work, so that you knew what you were doing, that you knew whether you fit into their culture or not, etc. What's happening now is that these corporations, particularly multinational corporations, we can talk about many of those, but these corporations are actually getting the public school system, and now increasingly the private school system, and ultimately the homeschool system. I don't know, you really can't talk about that as a system, but homeschoolers, to do their training for them. So it is a use of public resources as much as possible to do their work for them.
I think we're all of an age, ladies, that we remember that when we went out into the workforce, that sometimes we weren't quite sure where our chosen careers were still solid, you know, where we were going to fit in.
So you tried one job here,
and
you tried one job there.
And so it was kind of the springboard from which you used the basics of what you had learned previous.
But you had gotten enough of a basic education that you could navigate the differences in each job that you held.
Right, and education meaning that somebody had taught you how to think, not what to think.
And as I, as a classical educator, and I know classical has many different meanings, but in the true sense, one of the goals is to teach students how to learn for a lifetime. And we have gotten away from that.
Right, and but see, now this is interesting too, just as a very quick aside. You hear lifetime learning as a phrase all the time too now, right? And what I think of when I think of lifetime learning is exactly what you just talked about, Mary, but this is not what they mean when they say lifetime learning. What they're talking about is the ability to continually oversee how you learn and what you learn.
In particularly, it will be in your assigned or predetermined track. It won't be that, oh, I want to, you know, go out and bake cakes right now. No, I would be baking cakes the rest of my life whether I really wanted to or not.
Exactly.
What kind of future is that?
That is not. It's certainly not self-determination of any kind.
No,
and what parent wants to have some nameless, faceless bureaucrat determining their child's future?
Or no, better yet, what parent wants an assessment to predetermine how my child will learn and earn, and that's another spin.
And we can, it's a topic for another day, but some of these programs that we're talking about with the special education, PBIS, which I know is throughout Indiana and Wisconsin, I don't know about North Carolina, is definitely one. It records. It's a written record of all the indiscretions of a young child.
Absolutely, which is meant to follow that child around forever. It is permanently stored, and frankly, one of the purposes of this permanent record is for future employers to look at to determine whether this is somebody they want to hire. So you can literally blacklist a child very, very early.
Before they're 12 years old.
Bingo.
And if I blacklist them, then guess what? They're only going to be allowed to go to certain tracks for job training. They won't be able to, you know, that was then, this is now.
That's right.
Let's go on to talk about these competencies as we have, as they understand it. And this list comes from a document from the United States Department of Education. And it's called Promoting Grit, Tenacity, and Perseverance. If you have not taken the opportunity to look at this, I highly recommend this. you will find this list
And this
of
is
competencies on page 7. Go
okay, and this is a paper that was written for the Department of Education, correct?
Yes,
It's a
yes,
draft
yes.
paper that was
Right,
produced
yes.
for them. Mhm.
Let's look at some of the 3 channels, they call it 21st century competencies. And you see what the cognitive level is, and even it describes somebody who has been molded. They do list creative, but if you notice, that's down at the bottom. Right. Look at some of the titles under knowledge. It doesn't refer to accumulated knowledge so that you can walk into different aspects of your life with a base of knowledge and become more proficient.
To expand your knowledge.
Yes.
Right.
Now, the troubling parts of this are the other 2 categories. Interpersonal refers to inside yourself, and they talk about flexibility, adaptability, diversity, and those are all things that refer to not seeing right and wrong.
Right.
You do what you're told.
Right, exactly. Now let me point out, while you're looking at this particular list of competencies in this grit paper, they almost exactly mirror the global idea for how someone should learn, and they also mirror the early 90s scans report, the Department of Labor, and we talked about that earlier. Right. So here you're seeing it surface yet again in 2013, and it's continued on now into present day.
So this is, again, and what I would just clarify is that
yes,
this very similar sort of program then is being implemented, not just here in the United States, but in many, many countries worldwide.
Absolutely.
And we, as a matter of fact, in a sense, we have sort of been behind the rest of the world. It's taken them longer to implement this here.
Yes, because we're Americans, and it was really hard to get us to around that bend, but they've got us around the bend now.
Oh, they sure do. Yeah,
absolutely. And this is the social emotional learning.
Yes.
This is where it came from. This is what they are teaching your child.
Right. And if I could,
K through 12 again, especially for alternative education, it's in your community colleges, public-private colleges and universities, apprenticeships, vocation schools, and colleges.
Right, and again, they are collecting this data. They're collecting it in all sorts of different ways. They're collecting information about how your child behaves in the classroom. They're collecting information about how your what it means when your child responds to certain questions on an assessment. When they respond to, in a certain way on a homework assignment. It's all being collected.
And it also intrudes into your family's personal business as well.
Yes.
So we've talked about the interpersonal, and that means forming you to be this global citizen. And I urge you to pull up the document on your computers, go to page 7, and look at this. Is this really why you're educating your child?
Right.
And this applies to those who are homeschooling as well, because this is it's going to filter down to you. We have found over the years that what is in the public school eventually filters down through the curriculum, just through practices, so on. Let's take a look at the last column on this chart, and it's the interpersonal. Now that means person to person. Are you a good team player? How many times have we heard that? Do you work well with your peers socially? We're now seeing this in the classroom. I have for years. These social groups where they're given group projects.
And group grades.
And group grades. And of course, the 1 or 2 work hard, the rest do nothing. And then those that have done A work get a C or below because of the other 2.
Right, and to be clear, none of us has any problem with kids learning to collaborate, working together, doing things as groups. We don't have any problem with that per se. What we have a problem with is when this takes a particular kind of turn, which it has now in the public school classroom and elsewhere, where kids are not allowed to be the individuals that they are. Right. Every child is different. I think every parent knows every child is different. Every teacher knows every child is different. Yes. And when those children are not allowed to be the children that they are, but are instead being rammed into a mold that they don't fit, this makes for a lifetime of, frankly, damage to the child that extends into their adulthood and makes for miserable, in many ways, a miserable life. And so it's very difficult to watch that happening to children, and what we're just looking for is not to keep kids from collaborating, not to keep them from working together, but to ensure that they can be the children that they can be, and that they have all of the opportunities that they were meant to have to create the futures that are right for them.
Right, and I think I think we've said it before, but we need to say it again. You know, think for yourself, because if you are, and what we're seeing is children who cannot think for themselves, young adults who cannot think for themselves, and so these are the ones who are the biggest targets for, oh my goodness, if you cannot think for yourself, then here, let me tell you what to think.
Sure. And I think when I speak about interpersonal and intrapersonal skills, as you so eloquently stated, not one of us is against children learning those things. Right. But I think, as a teacher, I always have felt as a teacher, that that's kind of a family parent responsibility more than a teacher's responsibility. Right. Certainly, as teachers, we expect them to be appropriate, level, but they're all going to come at different levels of it. But it's the parent's responsibility. Agreed. And once upon a time, we would say to the parent, you know, your child is having trouble. How many of us remember back in the day when there was that box, works and plays well with others?
Right, but you know, this is, I think it's a good place to really talk about the fact that ESSA, this Every Student Succeeds Act, no longer views parents in this way. Oh, no. That parents really are viewed as utterly marginalized. Yes. That it's like, okay, thank you for providing your raw product, now step aside and we'll do the rest.
Yes, let me do it.
And it gets down to very specific language in portions of the regulatory language especially, I believe. But really, it comes right down to the government saying to parents, you are partners with us, but by partners they sort of mean marginal partners.
Yes. And you're not the
in the raising raising and development of your children. Yes.
Right. It's just absolutely mind-numbing when you see, like Kirsten was just saying in some of the language, whole family assessments for the sole purpose of student success. And if the family is not engaging enough, then the government comes in and helps you learn how to engage with your own children.
Yes, there's a draft letter of engagement in which the government is inviting parents to become engaged. And what a twist.
Yes.
Now, for homeschooling parents in particular, this is a huge slap in the face. It's also a big danger. You know, you have purposed to set your family aside. You have engaged with them to the degree that you have educated them well, and suddenly the government is going to come in and tell you, I'm sorry, Joe and Susie, you're not doing it right. Here's how you do it.
And of course, then there's the question, who determines if you're doing it well?
Exactly. Right. It does. Right.
Well, I would like to pull up the next slide and give everybody an opportunity to give a closing statement, something we would like to leave the parents thinking. And I would like to close with a thought about quality education. Quality education means that your child has a love for learning, is prepared to learn to grow and develop to be the best he or she can be. And this, what we're seeing now, is not providing our children with that.
Absolutely. I would, from my part, I really think that engagement is the key word here. It's not just that you need to engage with your children as a parent, as a homeschooling parent, as a private schooling parent, even as a public schooling parent. I know that we've sort of targeted this more to private and homeschooling parents, but if you're a public school parent out there listening to this, this means you too. Some of these battles, most of these battles at the federal level, frankly, we're just not going to win.
Right.
And we all know that sitting here, but we would still encourage you to fight the battle, because if you remain silent and if you stay unengaged, then they win by default. These people win by default. It is, they will consider that you have agreed to all of this because you never opened your mouth and you never lifted your head and you never raised a finger. So it's really, really important that we engage, even if we know we might not win the battles. And I think that especially when we think about local control, which is a good portion of what we've talked about here today, local control is the battle to wage. So rather than being so concerned with fighting or winning the federal and state battles, even though we have to fight them, rather than being so concerned with winning those head on, if we fight the local control battles, and if we start to figure out how to win those, then we begin to be able to be short-circuiting what's coming down from above. And I think that's what we really need to do, is short-circuit from the grassroots, from the local level, what's happening higher up the chain.
Right, exactly. And I would just say that, you know, if you've listened to this and you're like, I want to know more, I want to get involved, do know that your federal congressmen and women are in recess until the 25th of this month. So that means that they're in your local areas. What better time to pay them a visit, give them a phone call, send them an email. Even if you've done it before, do it again. Let them know you've listened to all this. Let them know what your concerns are. You've got to get active, because we cannot depend on our elected officials to fight this battle for us. We have to be those vigilant, diligent, loving citizens who love our children, love our country, and want to see quality education return to our classrooms, no matter where those classrooms are. We'd like to see our communities free from overrunning education in the name of student success. So if you'd like more information, please email us, and we're going to use Mary's contact information, and that is M as in Mary, Black, at F as in Frank, P as in Paul, E as in Edgar, USA.org. And you can certainly send us an email. We will be happy to pass on any information to you. We'll be happy to come and speak to you if you need us to. We thank you for taking time with us today.
And you ladies, it has been a pleasure to spend this day with you.
If you enjoyed this video and all of our videos, please consider a tax-deductible donation so we can keep the whole thing free for you. I'm Dr. Duke. Thanks for watching.